Gimpin ain't easy, but it's necessary. I be getting weary, cause shit be getting scary. But sit back, relax, and don't you dare worry, cause I be hitting wrongs with a righteous fury. Yes, sir, see, I am the only one. My name is Josh Dunn, gonna have some fun telling the truths y'all can't handle. I might raise a scandal as I dismantle the fake, make them quake and make them shake. I make you bend, but never will I make you break. Just chill, yo, and don't be frightened. Open that closed mind, it's time to get enlightened. Good evening, folks. We're back. This is episode number 3 of Gimpin Aint Eazy. We've got a very special guest. I'm not actually sure yet how to pronounce his last name. I know his first name is Paul, so I'm just going to say Paul the asshole with the shovel for now until he gets here and I'll get the proper pronunciation going. This week's episode, we have our sponsors as always. Once again, Cafe Sempoal is sponsoring us, where this week's feature film is the VHS copy of The Opposite of Sex. Is this the 1998 rom-com starring Christina Ricci and Martin Donovan, or is it a documentary about my life? Buy the tape to find out if it's Hollywood garbage or if I've allowed my sadness to be exploited once again. We're also brought to you this week, first time, by Charlie's Club, where the door window hasn't been kicked in for at least 7 months. Sorry about that, Charlie. So glad I found the right medication 7 months ago. And we have a third sponsor this week. We are also brought to you by Shreddy's Fart Stifling Men's Underwear. They'll suppress your stank, but simply cannot withstand the washing machine. The solution? Don't ever wash them. Well, folks, this week, since we're going to have a pretty hard-hitting Gimpsode, I decided that for my little topic of discussion, I would review the 2018 Academy Award nominees. Just a little aside, I have not watched Darkest Hour or The Post, so I have nothing to say about those yet. If you like these, maybe I'll talk about those next week or something. And I also want to talk about, I've sort of fallen out of movies in the recent years because I think shows like Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, they're kind of better, in my opinion at least, than almost any cinema that's coming out right now, at least that I've seen. But I decided over the last little while to watch some movies and catch up, and I gotta tell you, I think most of them were terrible and shouldn't have even been made, let alone nominated for the best goddamn picture. But I will say this much. I do think The Shape of Water was the right pick. One of the rare times, in my opinion, where the Academy gets it right. Yes, it was absolutely ridiculous. Sure, but it was gorgeous, and I really related to the romance in the film. I was the creature. It was very sad. And unfortunately, mine had a more unhappy finish. I loved it, but probably won't be able to watch it for 20 years. It just hit a little bit too close to home for me. Dunkirk was good if you dig action and tension-based war movies. I prefer war films that delve more into the morality and psychology of the situation. My favorite war flick, in case you're wondering, is I think out in about 1962, called Judgment at Nuremberg, and that's starring Spencer Tracy. I found the tension in Dunkirk annoying and not enthralling. Kind of reminded me of Das Boot, which is wonderfully acclaimed, but not really my cup of tea. It looked great, but ultimately bored me. Lady Bird was kind of lame. I mean, she's kind of entitled, but man, the mom is so mean. I was hoping to be able to relate to this because Lady Bird graduated high school 2 years after me. Fortunately, I couldn't really. It wasn't the most boring of the bunch, but ultimately I thought it was kind of flat. Reasonably accurate portrayal of high school kids in 03, I'd say, though, and Lady Bird just has this kind of spirit that's irrepressible. A little bit. It would shine out at times, so I dug that part. Man, Call Me By Your Name was so boring. Both the man and the kid seemed like assholes to me. It also felt kind of rapey. The grad student dude supposed to be about 22, and the kid 17. Not so bad, right? Yeah, the older dude looks about 38. Creepy, man. But the finishing talk with the dad and the son, though, is really sweet. So maybe watch the last 10 minutes of the film. Phantom Thread, I was worried was going to sort of fall into the trap of a lot of films with Daniel Day-Lewis of being weird for the sake of weird. And I think it at least half avoids it. It's pretty interesting and it looks great. Man, let me tell you, if Vicky Creeps was my wife, I'd be finding out exactly the right amount of poison myself so that we could get tender. And when I wasn't poisoned, I wouldn't be acting like the asshole that he was. I'll tell you that. Get Out was so absolutely ridiculous, I'm not even going to bother reviewing it. 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri was also extremely foolish, but I want to talk about just how. I had really high hopes for this film because Frances McDormand is a fabulous actor, and I really dig the premise of a no-nonsense mom taking the law into her own hands to achieve justice for her daughter who'd been raped and murdered. The plot twist of Woody Harrelson's suicide was kind of dumb and distracted from the story. Frances' Molotov cocktail in the police department and it burning to the ground was way too much for me. Also, the turnaround of the racist and violent young cop when he reads Woody's "You're a great kid" suicide pep talk note is bloody absurd. And the finish, where Frances and the racist team up to get a guy who wasn't her daughter's killer but likely killed another woman, is also another ridiculous stretch. Cliffhanger, where they're going to decide what to do with them when they get there, is one of the stupidest I've ever seen. But hey, at least this preposterous nonsense wasn't boring. If you'd like to hear more films reviewed and a big long dissertation of perhaps how cinema died after 1938, blame Hitler, tune in for some more reviews next time if you like this. And also, folks, I want you to know that if there's something, especially like a hard-hitting issue that you want my 3 cents on, I'm happy to give it to you. Let me know what you'd like to hear me talk about. Let's cut to this interview with my man, whose last name I don't know how to pronounce yet. He's Paul, and he rose to fame being the asshole with a shovel. Well, folks, I'm very happy to be here with, I said I had to call him Mr. Asshole with the Shovel in the intro because I didn't know how to say his last name, but now I've learned his last name is usually pronounced Vienneau. I'm here with Paul Vienneau. He asked to be on this show, so I was delighted to have him. We're going to talk about some real shit. He's been busy photographing for the tattoo, so I'm glad he's come to be with us this evening, and he's also suffering through a bladder infection, so what a fucking trooper for me. How you doing, Paul?
My bladder hurts. Everything's good, though.
I often say that. I have a lot of peeing issues, too, so I'm often in a lot of pain down there, so never been an infection, but I sympathize, man. So, I guess... Oh, yeah, I wanted to... So how did that gig with the tattoo come about? You're quite a photographer, I understand.
Yeah, I was a professional musician for like 35 years. About 7 years ago, I got tired of this sort of freelance scene is dead. There's a great music scene for people in their 20s right now. And after a life on the road or doing short tours, I just don't want to go and tour anymore. So I turned my photography hobby into a more serious thing, doing portraiture. Oh. So about 4 years ago, I called my buddy who did sound for the tattoo and said, I want to photograph maybe like 20, 30 people, but I want to pick them out. They'll get a souvenir picture. I get to photograph them. Everybody's happy. And he said, oh, just write a proposal to photograph every cast member. It's like 3,000 people in the tattoo.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So it's like how much it would suck to shoot a wedding times 1,000. So I just said, well, it's not going to happen. And then Jenny King, who I met through something at Neptune, is now one of the organizers at the tattoo. So I had lunch with her a few months ago and proposed I would like to do, like a little portfolio of portraits backstage. And she said, do it. So we went in, my friend Tim and I went in Monday. We get about 9-10 people. They're really happy with them at the tattoo. And I did a post today on Facebook, and they're getting a lot of good comments. So we're going to go back tomorrow night again, and then maybe twice on the weekend. It's the 40th anniversary of the tattoo.
Oh, wow.
So I'm thinking maybe like print up 40 of the best and maybe do like a gallery show, or it'd be really cool to do like a short run of some books, maybe just for the 40th anniversary. But
Uh,
it's not a paid thing.
uh,
I just wanted to do it.
yeah.
Um, maybe look at next year making it more an official part of the tattoo, maybe. But you know, for right now, it's great. I get to meet these people from around the world and learn about them, which is a huge part of photography for me. As somebody who is generally isolated a lot of the time, it's a great way to get out and meet people.
Yeah, you're out in the world, and I've seen those photos, folks. They're not just tattoos. There's some pretty striking images that he's put up there on Facebook. So I think that's a good idea. But you can photograph my tattoo anytime if you want.
Yeah, man.
Here.
Anytime.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to lead in with that, but I want to go to your early life more. Like, where were you born?
I was born at the hospital down where the new library is
Okay. Yeah.
in November 1968.
Wow.
I know, which sounds like the Middle Ages for a middle ager. But I grew up in Dartmouth in a place called Humber Park that backed up against Cherrybrook. It's right across the road from Forest Hills and Cole Harbour. And then in high school, we moved to Waverley. So I went from Graham Creighton Junior High, which was 3/4 black students, to 4 black kids at CPA High School.
Did you find the culture shift to be difficult at all, or?
No, it was cool. I never had issues with black kids growing up. We played sports together, played in bands together. It was never an issue for me. So, I mean, to go to CPA, it was in the mid 80s. It was like a John Waters movie. It was like 16 Candles, basically.
Right.
But the music I played was all, like black music, like funk and Motown and stuff like that. And then when I started playing professionally, I played with a lot of white musicians, but we played black music. And then I also played with musicians who lived down around Uniacke Square for a few years too.
Yeah, cool. I actually grew up right down by Uniacke Square, so it was and I didn't go to my neighborhood school
Yep.
because I went to Westmount because I was born with CP, and that had physio and things of that nature. So I
Gotcha.
went to school in the West End. But I'd always been in a black neighborhood predominantly, and then at King's though, like nobody from the square went to King's except for at least the year that I went. So there was maybe like 4 black students at King's at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's I noticed the cultural difference there. So I guess I have to ask this just because, and I think I have an idea, but how did you become disabled?
I went to jazz school at a high school at Santa FX, and then my brother and some friends of mine from Halifax had moved to Toronto to play music. So I left in the middle of a degree to go start my music career in Toronto, and about a year to the day, I was cycling with my brother. I was going through an intersection where I had a green light to go straight. A tractor trailer decided to blast past me to make the right turn, and so the trailer smoked me off my bike. A mountain bike. We went under the trailer part, like not under the wheels, but under the trailer part. Tumbled around. I remember seeing my bike frame a few years later, and it was like bent and twisted, pretty crazy. And that was my bones that did that.
Ugh.
Which was, it weirded me out when I first saw it because, I was sitting there in my brother's backyard with the one leg and the chronic pain and everything, but I hadn't actually thought of what my bike would look like. So it was like a 2-year hospital stay, about 40 surgeries, just like a lot of shitty memories.
Yeah, no, that sucks, man. Like I don't, I mean, I like I said, I was born with CP, so I don't really like. And as I hit 22, I started to have like urinary tract issues.
Yeah.
That was part of my adult body. But other than that, it's basically stayed the same. So
It's a chronic but manageable.
to an extent for sure. And so that's what because I believe I saw some posts and you talked about it being an arduous process with the 40 surgeries and stuff like that. But I don't want to lead too much here, but was there mistreatment sort of during the recovery process?
Nursing was pretty solid in the acute care. Spinal cord place, it wasn't actually abuse, but these were nurses who, a lot of them, young ones, had never worked in an ER or in an ICU. So they were used to, young men coming with their broken back or whatever to the spinal cord center. A few months later, they put them in a chair. A few months later, they go home. So for me, with an unstable pelvic fracture and, 3/4 of my body is either removed or covered in, at that point, it was like weepy scars that were still healing. I was a troubled patient, shall we say. So I did have one young nurse who would, if I came back from physio in a lot of pain, she would drag it out, helping me back into bed or with pain meds or whatever. But it was never, like malicious, getting dropped or anything. But when I went out into the community, I lived in a place in Portuguese Village that was it was supposed to be a transitional place for young guys like us to reintegrate into society. But what it ended up being was a lot of older, disabled adults who had been institutionalized their whole lives.
Right, you just kind of got
like in the
lumped
mental
there.
hospital,
Yeah. Ugh.
And so I was they promises of I'd reclaim my young manness and go out and whatever, and the neighbors hated us. They treated me like the village monster because the way I looked. These old Portuguese ladies grieving somebody who died 30 years ago, all in black wool in the summer, would look down where my leg or whatever was, and they would just and then cross themselves. And if I would say, "Hi, I'm your neighbor," that makes me uncomfortable. Do you have any questions? Like, let's be friends. And they refused to engage me eye to eye for 3.5 years, which really put a damper on me, slowed down my self-love and getting used to my new normal, basically.
Right. And did you find like that made you, because I often find myself like, the way that I walk or even just sort of move sometimes in a chair because my whole body is so spastic, I'm weary of what people might think of me. So I'm always kind of a little bit on guard, maybe more than do you find that happen to you?
Yeah. I became really self-conscious. Like, as I was at the same time I was touring with a band, and we'd fly across the country and play in front of 1,000 people in a bar out in Vancouver or something. And there was a point, probably 2-3 years, where I physically turned around to face the drummer when we played because I was getting so self-conscious by people looking at me. Every once in a while, I'd see someone look at my chair and look, where my leg was, and they try to figure out like, what the hell is it with this guy? And it just made me feel singled out. So I would turn around and play to the drummer, basically.
Right. I've never turned my back on a crowd performing, but I've felt like it a few times if there's not enough people there, or sometimes I think metaphorically kind of turned my back on society.
I mean, you can't control people's reactions to stuff. I mean, it'll be 27 years for me in August. I've kind of gotten over it. And then like being, the advocate stuff that I do, by nature, I have anxiety from my mom's side, depression from my dad's side. My depression manifests itself as isolation. So I'll spend days alone in my apartment, and then I go out and I can't make eye contact with people for a couple of days.
Yeah, I often spend a lot of time alone just with the difficulties pissing. I do manage to get out every day, but
Yep.
quite often it's just, for a quick coffee, and then I'm running and I'm reading books because I'm not so used to talking to people. And then you get to know certain folks and you kind of realize you'd rather not be talking to them.
Yeah, some people you don't want to talk to.
Right. And it's not that they're necessarily bad people, but it's just like the way they're going to react is annoying. And even if they're being supportive, like, "Oh, wow, you're sure going good, buddy." It's like, man, I don't want to hear
I
that.
get, "Hey, don't do any wheelies," or, like speeding ticket jokes. And if there's two of us there in chairs, we just look at each other and shake our heads and don't even talk to people.
That's right. And it's not worth getting angry because I'm not
Just making conversation.
Yeah, I'm not.
And they don't know what to say.
That's right. I'm not mad at it, but I'm like annoyed by it. It makes that, at least that's me anyway.
Yeah. I mean, with music gigs, sometimes I'll work my bag off for 3 hours entertaining people, and I play bass, which is the engine that makes people dance. So I'll come off stage. Everyone else is sitting there available to be talked to, and I'm trying to get an accessible cab to get home. People zero in on me like a laser beam, and like no foreplay. They go right to, so what happened to you? Or were you born like this? There's no, I need some foreplay, and I'll give you all my gypsy secrets. I need to get into it for a complete stranger. Otherwise it feels like, tell me a horror story.
Tickle me a little bit first, and then I'll tell you the full truth.
Yeah.
Right.
But I don't want to go from 0 to 100 from coming off stage feeling like a god for playing a great gig, and then, looking into a stranger's sad eyes as I'm telling them about, or they're wincing as I tell them about something. Even if I use like the least traumatic version of my story, it's still, I was hit by a tractor trailer. That's pretty serious shit.
Right.
So I don't want some stranger, going, oh, At least like, let's talk about what just 3 hours of me playing for you did.
Exactly, right? Let's focus on my strengths instead of my supposed weaknesses, right?
It makes you, like, I know for you, but it makes me the other. And not that I forget I have a disability. It's nothing like that, but I am me.
Right.
I do things. I play music. I take pictures. Yep. I do the advocacy. But, like, even with the advocacy, I do it as a citizen, not 100% as a disabled citizen. I do it because I feel it's for the betterment of all people in our city.
Right.
But, I mean, there's obviously an immediate benefit to people with disabilities.
No, totally, man. And that's what I was going to say, like, would you say your own attitude toward your disability has changed in the 27, 28 years that it's been?
Definitely. I was watching an interview with Rick Hansen, and the interviewer asked, if I could grant your body back right now, would you do it? And he said, no way, because this is, a wicked life that I'm living, which is true and obvious. I've got, chronic pain. I'm scarred up like crazy. I get stared at all the time. So for a super long time, I was like, I'd take it back in a second. Whether that makes me a failure, a self-hating gimp or whatever,
right?
I don't know. But in the last 3 years with my asshole work, as I call it, like I loved music. It was my reason to live. I thought I survived, all the horribleness to play music. So it was a leap of faith for me to not define myself as a musician for the first time in my life. And then, with the advocacy stuff, like I feel like I've actually found a useful point to my life. Like I'm actually contributing to the wider community and to my disabled community, whereas before I do like self-advocacy for things all the time out of need.
Yeah, pure necessity, right? You have to be a sort of a loud horn just to get your basic needs met sometimes.
Yeah, and our lives are logistics. Yep. If you can't, if the sidewalk is uneven, it screws you up.
Yep, completely. Like, I mean, even like I'm pretty fierce when it comes to that shit. But that winter when you were doing your shit and got noticed with shoveling the side, like I barely could make it out, and that's really saying something.
Yeah.
It was
it hosed everybody in the city.
Right.
I mean, I heard about a guy who was like a competitive ultra marathon runner who slipped on a poorly done curb cut and snapped his ankle and had to have plates put in. So if this guy can compete anymore for the rest of his life, like if it's undoable for I'll use the words, the least of us, the most of us, it's screwing those guys up too.
Oh, like if the super athletes become like us because of the weather condition, then we got to do some better fucking job clearing the sidewalks.
Here's an issue. Oh, we can curse in this? Fuck awesome.
Oh yeah, fucking A.
Yeah, and the point that winter was not, like I didn't. So the asshole thing. This is how I became the asshole. The first day that I shoveled, sitting in the snow, and in the slush for 6.5 hours, my brain starts to work, being a creative person. So I was like, I thought that the workers would think I was being an asshole, that I was calling them out personally by doing this, or the mayor, or the public works guys. And my theory was, well, they're not maliciously trying to fuck with my life, and I know that they're not.
Right. But they're not out to get us.
Yeah. So my theory was they don't have proper training. They don't know why it should be cleared down to the pavement. And they don't know how, if they don't do that, they don't know how that fucks all of our lives up. Not just you and me.
Right.
I didn't work for like 12 weeks that winter because I couldn't get off the friggin' block. I was calling stores across the street to bring me food so I could give them cash. And so think of like a little old lady who doesn't have a big mouth like us.
Right. What's she gonna do?
She's
Yeah.
hung out to dry.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And that's the thing. Like, yeah. Like if we are not taking care of, like you said, the least of us, for lack of a better term, then what kind of society are we really? And I
It's
just
not about pity.
no, it's about giving people their basic fucking. It's about dignity.
Yeah,
is what it is,
exactly.
right?
And we do all deserve it. And just because you like the wider society, just because they don't see this little old lady struggling, it's real. And given enough time, we will become that.
Yeah.
Like the thing about the people dying of bed sores.
Yes, I wanted to talk about that too. So I'm glad you bring that up. What was the stuff that you were saying about? And well, there was one, and I was going through your Facebook trying to prepare for this. There's one that was 40, wasn't it?
Yeah, and actually, I know her sister,
Ooh.
Elizabeth DeVoe, is a Christian singer who I played on 6 of her albums. And she's a lovely lady. And I remember she told me that her sister had spina bifida and was living in an institution. So yeah, her sister was not elderly. She was 40.
40 years
And
old.
spina bifida, it's like a mobility issue. There's no mental component that I know of. And through poor care, it became a fist-sized hole in her ass, and her organ shut down because of the infection.
Yeah, and that's just pure and simple neglect, isn't it?
Yeah, and the premier, rightfully, the government is proud of Bill 59, the accessibility bill. However, on the other end of his mouth, he's justifying cuts in care. So I don't use the word ableist a lot, but to me, this is a very ableist thing that if people get old enough, they become disabled by age.
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to, I'm already physically disabled, but I don't have another 20 years.
Right.
So, luckily I'll probably be long dead before I have to go to an institution. But, like if my folks had to go to a place like that, I would feel terrible. I know that staff cares and everything, but the way that they work, obviously there's an issue. They said there's 150 level 3 or 4 pressure sores, which is open, weeping, and not healing.
Right.
But I guess the total number of pressure sores in the registry is like almost 500 or 600.
Holy shit.
Like, Jesus, dude.
Yeah. So, and I think that when that's the whole problem with institutionalization too, and sometimes it's unavoidable, when somebody simply can't care for their basic needs. But I think if we were given more supports in the community, right, then it wouldn't be so. Because I don't even, I've been lucky, I go to some doctor's appointments and things like that, but I haven't been for a serious stay in the hospital since 1995 when I had my last surgery. So, since I was, just before I turned 12, right? So, I've been very, very lucky in that regard.
I saw the government today announced, I think they're building like 9 or 10 4-bed care homes out in the community, like all over the province, which is needed. But there's no reason the people who are in the mental hospital who have like CP or something, whatever their disability is, they don't belong in a goddamn mental hospital.
No, if there's no, mental illness there.
You're sentencing them to death. They're not integrated into the community. Who knows who's visiting them? But, people, where possible, people should be, and not just out in the suburbs, but where things are happening, like that Willow Tree development that's going to happen at the end of the block.
Right.
I'm really pissed off because counselors are talking about there's got to be a certain number of affordable units. And they haven't talked about, poverty and disability goes together.
Absolutely.
Why is nobody mentioning accessible units? And not everybody can live in an affordable unit. Everybody can live in an accessible unit. And you can do an accessible unit so that it's convertible, so that an able-bodied person living there wouldn't go, oh, I'm living in some, like hospital-y kind of, it could still be a wicked apartment.
There's so many railings I've injured myself,
Yeah.
no, right?
There's ways to do it where it would work for everybody. And nobody's talked about this. And with Bill 59, this is it's not even an issue with the bill, but the bill is one thing, but we have to change people's minds one by one so that they see naturally disabled folks should be able to live in a place like that too.
No question there from me at all. And so I just wanted to jump back for a minute, because this is not how I would typically do an interview with people, but because we're both GIMP, I'm going to sort of throw my 3 cents in every now and then. So you're no longer of the viewpoint that you wish the injury never happened to you?
No, in the last 3 years, I found actual purpose in my life.
Right.
I don't play the what if game about what if my injury wouldn't have happened while I'd be, a wife and kids like my brother and, whatever. Like, I don't play that game. I have what I have.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really healthy way to look at it. I feel that, like, if I had my druthers, like, I would take CP away. I would say that I'm glad that what I learned to have it, but it's just, and I have, chronic insomnia along. Like, if I just didn't have those things, like, I just feel like I'd be able to have a much more full life, girlfriends, like you said, like wife and kids, all that. But I still would take that, like, I like the perspective that it get. Like, I feel like I learned the lessons from CP, so
Exactly.
I'd like to move on now,
Yeah.
to a perfectly functioning.
I feel like that too. Like, I feel like I've learned a kind of patience for things.
Yeah.
Because, for us, we have to rely on people for stuff. Or we have to rely on situations, and they just take the time that they take. And and I know, if you just sit there and go, why is this not fucking... You're not getting there any quicker.
Nope. No, it's totally not. Oh no, so I gotta ask you: has all your anger about this led you to joining the Canadian version of the NRA? I've seen some shooting range photos up there.
So my dad's side of the family is Acadian. So I grew up. I never shot an animal before, and I'm happy about that. But I love target shooting with my dad.
Right.
I'd go with my uncles. I spent time with my grandfather. I like that.
Shoot cans, not caribou, folks.
Exactly. But the Armories is right down the street. I was a cadet in junior high, and we got to train with the militia a little bit too.
Oh wow, cool.
So I like shooting because it's like with photography. There's you have to still yourself to get a not blurry shot or whatever. But with shooting, I have shoulder injuries, my hands shake. John Rolfe at Nova Tactical over in Burnside installed an accessible bay. So it's like a 3-level where you can push a table in for like a platform to lean on. And the difference between the last time I was there and last week, like my bullet groupings were friggin' awesome. So
yeah, I think most of them were close to that A spot. Is that what you want to hit?
Yeah, I wasn't going, I'm going to do headshots now because I have no interest in, like shooting people. To me is just repugnant. Though
shoot paper, not people.
Somebody's got to do it though, and that's why we pay those guys to go overseas because they're doing it. And but yeah, I love target shooting as a sport, and guns scare the friggin' hell out of me. So I get to push through my anxiety. So I don't know if it's like controlled exposure to shit that scares me, but instead of going home all PTSD'd out, like I would if an ambulance came within a few feet of me with a siren,
right?
I'd go home feeling like, I pushed through discomfort and there I am with a bunch of adrenaline that's going to dump in about an hour and I'll have a great nap.
Yeah.
But I like shooting. It's fun. I never would shoot a person.
No.
I don't even want to own a gun, but I just go there and I rent a couple of cool things.
I hope that I would if I had to, like, if
I'd protect my parents.
If I had a gun and somebody was coming at me or somebody I love, you know what I mean? I hope I wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger, and that's, total self-defense scenario. But yeah, other than that, yeah, I don't want to shoot people because I'm angry.
I mean, the reality of the world is there are fucking assholes out there who want to kill people, and that's why we have a military.
Yeah.
So, it's as long as it's not some frivolous oil thing, then, I'm generally cool with. And I have family that served. I have a lot of friends who have served. My friend Paul Franklin in 2006 had his legs blown off in Afghanistan is the coolest, sweetest, not angry, not bitter dude.
No, I mean, you can't. Yeah, I find, too, that too often people are quick to condemn soldiers, when first of all, I mean, they're not even deciding on the wars that happen anyways, That's not their, they're not drafting the policy. And, yeah.
And there's like a warrior spirit and all that, stuff. I know there's talk about toxic masculinity and things, but there's something about being there in a group of guys together, that brotherhood feeling that, I mean, I haven't had like a band for a long time. It's been freelance stuff. But, you know, I have a punk band now, 1977. We're learning most of what the Clash ever did. We're doing like some Exploited, some Pistol stuff. And every Tuesday we rehearse, and I love that. You know, it's like having a street gang.
There you go. Playing tunes.
We're gonna go rumble.
Shooting folks.
We're gonna go rumble.
Rumble in the jungle in
Yep.
Halifax. I saw actually you guys are going to play the entire London Calling coming up soon, which is
At the Carlton, last Friday of July.
wow. Yeah, I don't get out to a lot of shows. I'm barely doing my own these days.
Yeah,
But
I don't go out that much either, even as a musician.
yeah, well, yeah. And if you say like you, I mean, I started comedy in 06. That's 12 years ago. But I mean, you were doing tunes before you even got hurt. So that's going back into probably the earlier mid 80s, maybe.
My first gig, it was in 1980. I was 12. I played with my brother's friends from Cole Harbor High, and we played like variety shows, stuff in the canteen, and you know that started it off.
Yeah. How do you feel about accessible transportation in Halifax here?
Disability is like a really wide continuum, so I don't want to get rid of Accessibus completely, but I don't think we need as many as we have because though the scheduling system has been revamped.
It has really.
Yeah. Mike Spicer is the new accessibility guy at Transit. So the way I work my advocacy is I don't write pissy emails.
Right.
I call people up and go, "Do you want to go for lunch?" And we sit because I believe when people look you in the eye and you humanize the issue, you're going to get a lot more effect than being some faceless, nameless dickhead from the internet.
Right.
So I
Feed them, and then they will do your bidding.
they'll do my bidding, my pretty. So I met with Spicer and even like Dave Regie, the head of Transit. I was at a symposium, might have been Cycling Coalition or a transportation thing, but I didn't personalize it to Transit. These are some issues I have with Transit, but it wasn't like these guys are fucking me over. It was we need to work together to fix it. So Dave Regie saw me as a non-judgmental resource. So he would call me for like I remember there's a manager's thing over in Dartmouth like a year ago that I went and spoke, and I shit on some of the stuff that they were doing, and at the end he still had a smile. So yeah, he told me that the scheduling's been revamped so that there's no more. They're thinking there will be no more one rider and one driver on that big friggin' vehicle.
Okay.
So it'll be a little more financially cool. But they have like dumb rules like 1,000 meters from a bus stop. There's somebody out in Montague Mines who lives, I can't remember if it's 1,500 meters from a bus stop, but he has to walk with a cane to get to the Accessibus.
That's pretty ridiculous. They can't quite go door to door, you know?
It seems arbitrary and goofy.
Yeah.
And then, like, for me as a musician, we played the 22 Minutes cast party a year and a half ago, and it was a Monday or a Tuesday, and it started to snow. It was like late in the winter, early spring, and every cab in the city had gone home, including the accessible ones.
Right. Probably they went first.
They went first. But my nighttime guy, who I have a relationship with now, he's Egyptian. He hates the snow, and he's got bad knees. So he went home. So I had to offer him $100. This doesn't reflect on him. This is me.
Right.
It was either sleep on the stage overnight and wait for the morning and see what I could do, or get pushed through the salt and slush and get my new chair destroyed by, the conditions. So he came down from Spryfield to the Carlton for $100, so to take me home 4 blocks.
Yeah.
So the problem is the taxi industry, it's not like Toronto where Beck owns a fleet of vehicles. Each driver owns their own vehicle here. So Yellow Cab or Casino or Bob's or Satellite cannot, they say compel, but they can't schedule someone to work at all. So that's why on a beautiful summer afternoon, there won't be one accessible cab.
Right.
Or overnight, there won't be any. So this is why, about transit, like I have a proposal. I would love to see Halifax Transit buy a fleet of 10 or 20 accessible vans, the same ones as New York City that are made in Detroit, so that they last. And maybe some of the drivers diverted from Accessibus if we cut down on the numbers of those a little bit, could drive these things, but they could schedule one accessible cab every night, maybe.
Absolutely. And I mean, or, they could at least, have, like I know, like sometimes my Red Cross workers have to be on call, right? So like have it sort of at the, you know what I mean? Like, and you
Yep.
pick up some, and I love the fact that you're saying, because if there's going to be less buses, less drivers, they could be streamlined into this cab thing. So, they wouldn't lose a job. And, I mean, I'm supporting the rights of workers. Hopefully they'd get an even better salary.
I want everybody to make money.
Right.
I want them to see that we're a community. I mean, I know a lot of poverty and stuff, but some of us get chits from who we work for. Like, we're a place that they could spend money. But I believe that when, 6-7 years ago, they said, okay, the city said, okay to accessible taxis. In the beginning, they wouldn't dispatch them. So I would call and say, I need a cab here, accessible. And they would say, here's 3 phone numbers. Good luck. So I'm calling dude at home having Sunday dinner, or it's Orthodox Christmas, and his wife's looking at him like, why are you taking calls, asshole?
Yeah.
So they wouldn't take the responsibility to dispatch, because to the cab companies, it's all this bother to do all this extra stuff. And then they all of a sudden they started to dispatch them, because all of a sudden they seem to be okay with dispatching. But now if you call and say, could you give me a very ballpark time of arrival within, 40-minute window, they won't do it, because they say they can't tell. But if they look at the goddamn screen, there's a letter A before the numbers of the cab. They can see where they are.
Yeah,
they can
yeah.
see if they're on a call or not. And because they're there to equalize things, we get priority. If we call, that guy, when he's open, has to come to one of us.
That makes sense to me.
But the drivers, like the city didn't say buy reinforced vehicles. They just said, like a mom and pop and 2 kids minivan, put in 1,500 pounds of upgrades. Transmission gets fucked. The suspension starts to disintegrate right away. These guys can't make any money, and they're always in the shop getting things fixed. So I don't feel comfortable with the responsibility put on the drivers. I think they get some grants, but they're in for 70 grand to just get on the road.
Wow.
And we went from about 50 active accessible cabs. This week I read somebody said that there was 20 still on the road. I have a feeling there's about 10.
Wow. So from 50 to 10, that's just not enough to serve the community.
They can't make any money.
No.
And we're like a very diverse geographically county. So if they're all downtown, somebody in Spryfield or in Sackville needs to go 4 blocks, and they're physically unable because they're a quad, or maybe they're ambulatory with CP or something. The cab has to go all the way to Sackville, drive them 4 blocks, wait around, and then drive them home, or come back to the city, and then the guy's got to wait.
Yeah.
Who knows how long to get back to their house with their groceries. So there needs to be a better way. So my proposal is that the city do this, schedule them. So, in each zone, there's at least one. But there's got to be some workaround to make this work.
Yeah. And no, these things are really sort of eye-opening for me, because I'm, if I go to my scooter, I don't get a cab. I often have to stick close to home and like live my life in short spurts, as I was saying, for an hour or 2 here and there, that kind of deal. But I just I just end up like I can take a regular cab if I need to, or that kind of thing, right? And I haven't dealt with excessive bus for years, just because I found they could be an hour early, an hour late, not reliable. And I'm lucky to have a few friends who drive, like the producer man here and things like that. My family's pretty supportive, and I have enough mobility and things like that. Like it's a funny thing, like. What did I want to... Yeah, before I get into what I was going to sort of close off with, I wanted to ask a couple more things. You recently got an award for your activism. How about tell the folks out there in podcast land a little bit about that, maybe?
Yeah, it's from the James McGregor Stewart Society. He was... I can't remember what his disability was, but he was supposed to be a Rhodes Scholar to study law. And... so they said, your disability will make it too hard. You can't do it. And he figured out how to become a lawyer, and he was a kick-ass lawyer. and one of the law firms in town is named after him. I think his era was about 100 years ago, or late 1800s. But yeah, it came with a financial thing, which is great because it paid a bill that's been hanging over my head. I mean, I don't know if any of us do this for awards, but
I'd do it for money.
you know what? I would do it for money too. If I had 30 years, I would turn it into an industry like that. For me personally, I don't know what I have for time. So now that I found a good groove and I'm getting some work done, I'm really happy to do free consults generally for things. Speaking engagements. I'm speaking at a government thing in October, and I think I'm gonna. My rate for that is actually way higher than I've ever asked for speaking because it's a government thing.
Yeah, they can afford it.
And I think I'm really worth it. You know, at this point, I think I'm worth it. Yeah, it's awesome to get awards because it's good for PR reasons. It builds your legitimacy as, you know, for what you're doing and all that stuff. But it's nice to get a pat on the back because when you're doing it, it's like you're alone when you're doing all this stuff. And then, you know, holy crap, people noticed me doing this. You know, it's a really cool thing. And it helps spread the message too. And I mean, we have disabilities, but so here's something I'd like to talk to you about. You use the word cripple, right?
Yeah, amongst other offensive terms, sure.
Yeah. So, and this is personal. I never preach like you shouldn't,
Right.
or whatever. But there was I think it was Richard Pryor, used the N-word in his work forever. I think it was him who said that word describes our wretchedness. And so for me, the sort of things when you think people with disability, we're undateable, we're unfuckable, we're unemployable, we're poor bastards and all these things. Personally, for me, I get to the point where I have a horrible inner negative voice.
Right.
That tells me how much I suck and how women don't think I'm handsome and I'm a scarred up piece of shit and why would she want to date me or why would these guys want to be my friends? I'm a horrible person, which is, you know, it's all bullshit. But whenever I was using the word cripple, it felt like I was, you know, people who cut themselves. It was like I was cutting myself inside.
Right.
Which is why this is just for me, not for anyone else. But for me to tell people, like they say, people treat you the way you show you want to be treated.
Right.
And I feel like for me, I don't want to give people the right to think or the idea to think of me like that because it's such a one-dimensional thing. Like when I was shoveling, it was not about, I think why I got really good results. I was not poor cripple Paul and I was not super gimp.
Right.
I did it as a citizen, which is why I think I got really good effect on things.
Right. I'm going to tell you exactly. No, and I think that's bang on. And I think you've got to, quash that inner voice because, man, it's only holding you back. And
I've been, dude, once I identified it,
yeah,
it's like, yeah, that guy's a fucking asshole.
Yeah, right. That's the asshole that doesn't even have the balls to take the shovel, right?
Yep.
Right, they're just gonna. But I'll tell you why I use when Gimpin Aint Eazy and crippled things like that. It's not from a negative thing, and it's somewhat ownership, but it's more. I've noticed a sort of a real PC disability culture, like you're supposed to put brackets around the fucking disc.
Yeah, people first and
and all differently abled or personally like. And to me, that does like the language fetishism that can change really at the drop of a hat. That doesn't do anything to speak to real issues. So I'd rather use terms like gimp and cripple and just like let's focus on the real shit.
Yep.
And for me, and I do and part of this I think comes because I'm not as physically disabled as some others. Like I'm not confined to my scooter. I don't need a ramp necessarily to get an ability. I have to live in one to be able to get my scooter in and out, but just on a day to day, like stairs aren't gonna fucking end my journey kind of thing, right? But for me, what's so big about like disability dignity is the space that you're going to go into. Is it going to lead to meaningful friendships, dignified professional opportunities, or honey boo boos? You know what I mean? So I was curious, like For you, is it that like fuck, we actually need to be getting in these spaces before we can talk? Because for me, it's kind of like if that's what we're doing and we're not human beings yet, and not addressing those real like life issues and dignity issues, then I kind of think those ramps and that stuff might be for naught. But what do you think about that?
Somebody could probably make the argument that using a horrible word like that on yourself is kind of denies your dignity. But I mean, what I think, you have to live like you own it. So if you use those words to describe yourself, you got to own it. So that if somebody who's able-bodied is joking, yeah, he's a crippled guy, that's our word.
Yeah.
That's not your word. And I mean, it is our word. I remember being at the spinal cord place, all these folks with newer injuries, and we were using it like it was almost like this masculinity thing, like raging against the dying of the light and all that shit.
Right.
Like we're here, we're all emasculated physically in some way, maybe. We're owning this word because we're, it's like fuck you, devil or death or God or whatever. And also, I mean, I'm going to be 50 in November. So I've had enough angry time.
Right.
And the thing I love about getting older and young folks, like, I remember when I was 22, I know so much. But
Yeah.
at this age, I don't know this even more. Like the more you learn, the less you actually know.
A lot more questions have to get raised with the new information, eh?
And if I lived to be 300, I wouldn't know everything. And that's the thing. Like my beliefs literally are we're in this unknowably huge and chaotic universe that's expanding or contracting, but it doesn't matter. We're insignificant on this tiny little rock. So, like as an atheist, I've had people ask, what's to keep you from murdering or raping? Well, because it's fucking wrong.
Right.
I don't
need God to tell me that either.
No, I know it's wrong. So why does anything matter? Because we feel it, and we have compassion for people. So if I do something, and like handing out bottles of water on Spring Garden Road, I remember in my spiritual search post injury, reading about Tibetan Buddhism and the idea of charity, not doing it. And it's funny for a guy who's on TV and the news all the time to say this, but to do something to a stranger that's unconditional and kind. My ex-wife accused me of this all being about my giant fucking ego, but it's the complete opposite. Like, this is humbling in the most awesome way, because I am one of all these people playing a tiny part in moving us forward to make things better. And I love that, like seeing that I have a place. Every once in a while, someone in the city will go, hey, you're that guy. My dad was a judge in the 70s, and he was in a wheelchair, and he made like the judge chambers accessible or whatever. Like, this is not about, well, I'm trailblazing this freedom movement. It's like, 2 weeks after I die, no one's going to remember who I am.
I don't know about that.
Well, yeah, I don't know about that either. But like 5 years after, 15 years after, a new group of people come up, right?
Right.
So what my sort of dream is that anything that I do that makes an improvement, some kid is going to be able to take advantage of that to go to the art gallery on a date at the drop of a hat and not worry about how he's getting there, or work at a shitty job at McDonald's. He's going to be able to do these things without the struggles that so many of us are still having to do to do these simple things that everybody takes for granted. But it's like steps forward and then things going back. Meeting more people who have done this or hearing about more people just reminds me that it will always be ongoing. And we all have a place in that, and that's good work.
No, totally. I know. I hope that too. For future generations that want to be, some kind of artist. I mean, I do. I'm a comedian. I do some poems. I'm doing this now. I've got a serious theater show. A bunch of those things. Because I am gifted enough or fortunate enough, rather, there's no gifts there to be able to get into spaces. I'm really looking to get into the hearts and minds.
Yes.
It's a psychological thing for me.
And that's where the real work is.
Yeah.
Like, you're changing people's minds. Like, you're changing their realities by being an example of, like somebody they would, this fucking kid with cerebral palsy got up on the stage and slayed everybody.
Right.
And they would not expect that before. I didn't even think of it, but somebody a few years ago, told me every gig I ever did, I was advocating that somebody like me could do that job.
Right. Exactly.
Got
Exactly
up
right.
that long flight of fucking stairs, or down into Tommy Africa's in Whistler Village, and up onto that high stage and rocked it for 4 nights or whatever long the gig was. But I've been sort of mentored by people consciously, but then also by people. I just watch what they do and try to model what I do on that. And then the cool thing is realizing I've become one of those guys.
Totally. Yeah.
And you're one of those guys at fucking 20, what are you, 22?
Oh no, I'll be 35.
Oh yeah, you said 12 years ago you started.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
like you've been unconsciously mentoring and consciously mentoring people for a long time just by existing. I don't have to sit home and not do anything. Here's a guy like me who's out doing what he really loves to do.
Yeah.
And it's like with the shooting, with the range shooting, if I get my stuff together, I could compete with any able-bodied shooter.
Right.
With sailing, it's the same thing. With comedy, writing, like you're competing with able-bodied people on an equal playing field.
Yeah.
And by not have to rely on ramps and stuff like me, you
Yeah.
can get into spaces that I could never get into.
No, and I think though that we like when it comes to people that are making booking decisions and things like that, that's where we've got to go a little further.
Definitely.
Because there's still that perception there. But what did I? Yes, I wanted to go back and I wanted to talk about how, like, just a quick little, like, that ex-wife saying it was about your ego or whatever.
The first winter, she came up to me. The last day I shoveled, I'm covered in melting snow and ice. I've got 2 shovels because me and this guy Jackie cleared these 2 disabled spots. There's like a 1.5 foot of ice by Scotiabank on Brenton Street. And I'm in, and people are high-fiving me in Lawton's. I'm getting water to go up and have a nap. And she walks up and said, "Well, I was very impressed how you managed to make yourself the center of attention this winter." Like a big sheet-eating grin, like she's paying me a high compliment. But she's trying to cut me down. And I just, at that point, I went, yeah, I think I'm going to believe the people high-fiving me instead.
Yeah, right. And my perspective on that is, like, even if she's right, even if that's you're still making a difference, right? So it's like
I'm not getting rich off this, that's for sure.
no, you know what I mean? It's not you're not some crooked televangelist or Dr. Phil peddling bad advice. I remember watching that one time with my mom, and I gave the opposite advice of everything.
Yeah, you can't. Don't sell me a pig and a poke. Fuck you, Dr. Phil.
Yeah. Fuck you, Dr. Phil. I think that's pretty. Like, is there anything that you wanted to add or?
Here's the thing, and this is like I have anxiety, legit, and depression, and this is like your mileage may vary kind of a thing, but old Uncle Paul's gonna lay some advice on people out there in the listening land. The reason 3.5 years ago why it was transformative for me personally. I decided to not get pissed off, and it's not that I don't get pissed off. I get pissed off all the time, but instead of deciding, a lot of times when I get pissed off, I realize I'm going, yeah, fuck it, let's get pissed. And then it pushes people away or whatever. So by not getting pissed off, it opened so many doors for me personally, but mainly it opened the door to myself where I could learn to forgive myself and start to see myself as somebody actually contributing to society instead of just being reactive all the time. I was going out and I call it my bubble of influence. I can't change the world or the city. But if anything's within this little bubble, that winter it was a shovel. I could clear within that bubble. If I can get down the sidewalk, there's a curb cut. I can affect that somehow. For me, anxiety feels like a lack of control over things. With this, I realized I could exert, even if it's an illusion of control, it gives me a feeling in this unknowingly huge and chaotic universe that I had control over this tiny little speck of land. So, if anyone is up for it, instead of getting pissed off, and I know with social media it's easy to, in fact, I had a fight online with Matt Whitman for months because he's a dipshit.
I don't even know who that is.
District 13. Oh. He helped me with a lot of things, but he's basically like a populist douchebag and whatever. And Anyway, I wrote a complaint letter to,
Don't vote for him, folks.
yeah, District 13 needs a better representative. It's not even that he's conservative. Political labels are bullshit. They divide people. I'm liberal as fuck. However, we've all got conservatives in our family that are awesome people and liberals in our family that are assholes, and vice versa. It's just fucking people. But, try it sometime where your instinct, this happens again, I'm fucking pissed. Try to make a conscious decision to just let go. If it's not going to serve anything for you to rage about it, just let that shit go. And you might find that it opens some doors. Maybe it helps you feel better about yourself because you're not mad at yourself for raging about this shit all over again. But yeah, I get mad at stuff all the fucking time, man. But I realized it was becoming like a self-fulfilling prophecy. This sucks. I get mad. Of course, things go to shit.
Right. Nothing's going to change then if you're so bogged down by the anger.
And this is not that phony inspirational bullshit because I hate that stuff so much.
No, because that shit doesn't fucking do anything. That's these fucking glad-handing disability agencies that think they're doing a lot when, I don't know, what do you think about those guys, the disability agencies?
Everybody's got different motivations.
Fair enough.
If they're doing good work, I guess it's good. But, like a lot of sort of support things, and this isn't even disabled specific, but I think a lot of times when you work programs like that, it keeps you, it's like a self-perpetuating thing. I will never stand up and walk around, but I can exert control over my life. Early on in the hospital, and then like in attendant care, I did everything I could to be independent for as long as I can. And, knock on wood, at 49, my wooden leg, or your wooden head plate.
My wooden noggin.
Your wooden noggin. I'm still able to basically live independent. And it really matters to me.
Yeah, that's huge for me too. Like if I had to go live at home, I'd personally, I mean, this is not to take anything away from the folks that do. I'd personally rather be dead.
I worship my mother. My mother was so strong when I was in the hospital. Like, it blows my mind. I don't want to live with my mom. If my dad, don't listen to this. If my dad happens to pass away, I want my mom maybe to come live with me because I love my mother.
Right.
But, for years my parents said, your dad will build a house down the street from us. You can stay there, we'll be near. And I stayed in Toronto for years longer because I didn't want to be taken care of by my folks. I moved to Toronto to play music and be an adult.
Yeah.
And I stuck it out as long as I could.
Look at that, folks. He stayed in the smog to stay away from his parents.
Hear that, Mom? My mom's crying now.
He loves you. He just didn't want to be under your care.
I worship my mom. My mom's the best. But, you got to be an independent person. And even like the people who are in the mental hospital who have disabilities, I'm guessing if they have any like medical care that has to be done, those are not the nurses to do it.
Right. Those aren't the nurses that are trained for that specific care.
The government should fund in-community venues. So this Willow Tree thing, why not, if they're going to build a 4-bed building or put it somewhere, why not put it in there? They're living in the community. It teaches everyone in that community that these people are part of the community, and they see that, they have value in the community just by existing and being alive. I think that would be pretty legit.
From what moral ground could you argue against that?
Well, the developers for the accessible units will say, oh, it's more expensive or whatever, but it's, there's the ongoing social cost of keeping people from living fuller lives when you have the power. And plus, yes, the developer has the right to make money. What's his responsibility?
Right. And if he thinks his only responsibility is to make money, then in my opinion, he's not a very good community developer.
Yeah. I mean, if you're developing communities, it's not just about your nest egg and your legacy. You want to leave a legacy, empower these people who are the least of us or whatever, to live in this place. And then 20 years down the road, it could transform all developments. It's not about, these poor bastards living among us, but, everybody whoever wants to should be able to pop out their front door and go get a fucking coffee.
Absolutely.
And have a neighborhood.
And that's what I don't see how that can be argued against, right? From any more, like maybe it's not as financial, but I mean, fuck, I don't think there should be billionaires if it means that some people are starving and homeless. That's
How
me.
much money does one person need?
Right, exactly.
And when you get into billions, that's like an inconceivable amount of money.
Yeah, to like 99 point whatever percent of the rest of us, right?
And God bless Bill and Linda Gates for what they do.
Yeah, they're doing some good work.
They give a
out there.
lot of money away.
Yep. Yeah. So hear that, you billionaires out in podcast land? Be like Bill and Linda Gates.
Shake some loose. Help some people.
Give me a quarter.
Hey. Of $1 million.
So, and I think that's pretty. Yeah, I'll take a million pennies. I think that's still, what is that? 10,000 or $10,000? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's about it. I think you've sort of touched on it. Goes to my meaning of life means we're supposed to try to make the world a little bit better for having us in it and enjoying ourselves in the process. So you've sort of reiterated for me, we just need to let go of that rage, or I would maybe amend, at least channel it into something productive, right? Because if it's
a good motivator.
Yeah, if it's just the rage, it's going to be bogged down and that's going to change. But just get a little happy, get focused, get motivated, and fuck, you can make a difference too.
Here's another advice from Uncle Paul. Life's too short.
It certainly is.
Because I've been at the point where my life ended, and it's all of a sudden, and it's fucking forever. So, live according to how you want, but, you have the power to affect people by the way you live. If you want to do it, you don't have to do it. I don't want to be preachy, but, life is a pretty sweet gift. And as somebody with a body that feels like garbage most of the time, I'm grateful as hell to be alive, dude. I get to meet really cool people with the photography and the music and all these different communities. I mean, I'm a part of a community, the disabled community, where anybody can join us or leave us at any time. We're all colors, we're all religions, we're everything. So for me, with the old people dying from pressure sores, I feel like, our people are being fucked over with this.
Yeah. That's absolutely right, folks. This has given me a new thought to remember everybody else. I mean, I'm wanting to get in hearts and minds, but sometimes I forget how lucky I have it. And Paul, you've helped remind me of that a great deal.
Well, I'm an inspirational guy.
Yeah, you can't help it, eh?
Whatever.
You can't help. Here with a bladder infection, suffering out this.
The inspiration from my pain.
Yeah, suffering out this 1 million hour podcast.
I'm drinking so much water, it's beautiful.
Yeah, denying my whiskey. He's been Paul Vienneau. I've been Josh Dunn. Remember, folks, like I always like to say, give yourselves that Ric Flair. Woo! You are the greatest of all time. I know I am. Good night, everybody.